The courthouse in downtown Atlanta was buzzing with tension that morning. Lawyers in crisp suits shuffled papers. Families whispered nervously, and the smell of fresh coffee lingered from the lobby. But in the middle of all that formality stood someone who didn't fit the picture at all, a little black boy, no older than 10, holding his mother's hand tightly. His mother, dressed in a simple faded blouse, looked exhausted. Her eyes carried dark circles, the kind that only came from too many sleepless nights of worry. People stared as the boy adjusted the small tie around his neck. It was clearly borrowed, too long for his tiny frame, but he wore it with pride. When the clerk called their case, he let go of his mom's hand, straightened his back, and walked forward with a confidence that didn't match his size. The judge, an older man with gray hair and stern glasses, looked over his file, expecting the usual, a public defender, maybe a lawyer rushing in at the last moment. Instead, the boy cleared his throat and said loudly, his voice echoing in the courtroom, "Your Honor, I'm my mom's lawyer." The entire room froze. A few people chuckled under their breath, thinking it was a joke, but the boy's face didn't flinch. His eyes burned with determination, and his small fists clenched at his sides. His mother whispered desperately, "No, baby, please sit down." But he shook his head. "I know I'm just a kid," he continued, his voice trembling yet strong. "But nobody knows my mom's truth better than me. She doesn't deserve what's happening to her. And if nobody else is going to fight for her, then I will." The judge leaned back in his chair, his eyebrows raised in disbelief. This was no ordinary interruption. The silence was so thick, even the sound of the pen dropping would have felt like thunder. The boy's mother covered her face, tears slipping through her fingers. The judge studied the boy for a long moment, then finally said in a low, serious tone, "Son, if you're going to stand there and call yourself a lawyer, then you better be ready to prove it. Do you understand what that means?" The boy nodded, his chin trembling but lifted high. "Yes, Your Honor, I'm ready." And with that, the courtroom shifted. What was supposed to be a routine hearing had just turned into something nobody could have predicted. The judge leaned forward, folding his hands under his chin as he studied the little boy. The attorneys in the back whispered to each other, some smiling, others shaking their heads. "This is ridiculous," one of them muttered. But the boy didn't flinch. He stood tall, even though his knees were shaking under his tiny slacks. "All right, then," the judge finally said, his voice deep and commanding. "Tell me, son, why do you think your mother deserves to be defended by you?" The boy glanced back at his mother. She shook her head slowly, silently begging him to sit down, but he turned back to the bench. His small voice rang through the room with an honesty no adult lawyer could fake. "Because my mom is the bravest person I know," he began, his voice quivering but clear. "She wakes up at 5 every morning to work 2 jobs. She cleans offices when everybody else is still asleep. She takes care of old people who can't take care of themselves. And when she gets home, she still makes dinner for me, helps me with homework, and kisses me goodnight. She's never broken the law. She's never hurt anybody. But now, she's being treated like she's done something bad. Like she's a criminal. And it's not fair." The courtroom was silent. Even the clerk had stopped typing. The boy's words cut through the air like a knife, sharper than any legal argument. His mother's shoulders shook as she cried quietly, ashamed yet overwhelmed with pride. The judge cleared his throat, trying to keep his voice steady. "Son, this court is about facts, not feelings." The boy nodded. "Yes, Your Honor, but the facts are right here. My mom doesn't have money for a lawyer. Nobody wants to listen to her because she's poor. But I listen. I know she didn't do what they're saying. And if this court is about justice, then somebody has to speak for her. That's me." The boy's small hand trembled as he lifted a stack of papers he had scribbled on with a pencil. They weren't polished legal briefs, just notebook pages filled with his messy handwriting. "I wrote down everything. Every time my mom was at work. Every time she was home with me. She couldn't have done what they're saying. I can prove it." A gasp rippled through the room. The prosecutor, who had been silent until now, smirked and stood. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. We can't allow a child to play attorney." But before the judge could respond, the boy stepped forward, his voice firm despite the tears brimming in his eyes. "I'm not playing. This is my mom's life, and I won't let anyone take her away from me." The judge exhaled slowly, realizing this wasn't a stunt. It was a child's desperate fight for the only person who mattered in his world. The prosecutor adjusted his suit jacket, clearly annoyed. "Your Honor, this is absurd. We can't waste the court's time with a child's imagination." His voice dripped with arrogance, as if the boy's courage was nothing but a nuisance. But the judge held up his hand. "Sit down, counselor," he said firmly. His eyes never left the boy. "This court will decide what is or isn't a waste of time." The little boy took a deep breath, gripping his messy notes tightly. His hands shook, but his voice carried the weight of every sleepless night he'd spent worrying about his mom. "They say my mom stole from her job, but that's not true. She was with me the whole night. They claim it happened. I wrote it all down." He flipped through his notebook, pages filled with shaky handwriting and doodles in the margins. "She made me macaroni and cheese. We watched a movie together. And then she read me my favorite story until I fell asleep. I even remember the pajamas I wore. They had little dinosaurs on them." The room softened. People weren't just listening to a kid anymore. They were hearing a memory, a piece of his heart. His mom buried her face in her hands, whispering prayers under her breath. The judge leaned back, studying the child carefully. "Do you understand what's at stake here? If your mother is found guilty, she could go to prison." The boy swallowed hard but nodded. "That's why I have to do this. If she goes away, who's going to tuck me in at night? Who's going to tell me everything's going to be okay when the world feels scary? She's not just my mom. She's my whole world. And I won't let anybody take her away when I know she didn't do it." For the first time, the courtroom grew still in a different way. Not out of shock, but out of respect. Even the prosecutor shifted uncomfortably, realizing the boy's words carried a power no polished argument could match. The judge sighed deeply, adjusting his glasses. "Son, you don't have a law degree. You don't have training. But you do have something that's hard to ignore." The boy's eyes widened. "What's that?" "Truth," the judge replied softly. "And sometimes truth speaks louder than all the lawyers in the world." The boy clutched his notes tighter, hope flickering in his eyes. He didn't know what would happen next, but for the first time, he felt the court might actually listen. The judge tapped his gavel lightly, not to silence the room, but to gather his own thoughts. "Very well," he said finally. "If you're going to speak for your mother, then you must show us evidence. Not just memories, facts." The boy nodded quickly, flipping through his messy stack of papers. His hands trembled, but his voice grew steadier with every word. "I kept a journal, Your Honor. My teacher told us to write about our day, so I've been doing it every night before bed. I wrote down what me and my mom did, even the little things, like the night they said she stole money." He pulled out a wrinkled notebook, its cover decorated with stickers. "See? I wrote that she cooked dinner, and then we watched a movie. I even drew a picture of us on the couch. She couldn't have been stealing, because she was right next to me." The courtroom murmured again. A child's notebook, filled with innocent handwriting and pictures, now stood as a timeline stronger than the prosecutor's cold accusations. The boy flipped the pages, showing dates, times, and scribbles of everyday life, a mother and son just trying to survive. The prosecutor scoffed. "Your Honor, this is nothing more than a child's diary. Hardly credible." But the boy shot him a look that was braver than his years. "It's not just a diary. It's proof. Every night I wrote down what happened, because my teacher said writing makes memories last. So if anyone tries to say my mom wasn't there, I can show them she was." The judge leaned forward, motioning for the bailiff to bring him the notebook. As he flipped through the colorful pages, something softened in his expression. Among doodles of stick figures and math problems, there were carefully written entries, dates that matched the nights in question. The child's voice broke through the silence. "Adults keep saying poor people don't have evidence, but sometimes we keep the truth in ways you don't expect. This is mine." His mother's tears spilled freely now, her hand clutching her chest as if her heart might burst. The judge closed the notebook and looked at the boy with new eyes, not as a nuisance, not as a child playing games, but as a fighter with the purest kind of testimony. "Son," he said gently, "you may not wear a lawyer's badge, but today you brought this court something more powerful than law books." The boy straightened, his chin lifting. "I brought my mom's truth." And for the first time since the trial began, hope lit the room like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. The judge placed the boy's notebook gently on the bench, almost as if it were fragile evidence too precious to mishandle. The courtroom was silent, waiting for his reaction. He cleared his throat, glancing from the child to the weary mother, then over to the prosecutor, who was now shifting uncomfortably in his chair. "Counselor," the judge said, fixing his gaze on the prosecutor, "you claim this woman stole money from her workplace. What evidence do you have to prove she wasn't at home with her son that night?" The prosecutor straightened, forcing confidence back into his voice. "We have a witness who claims to have seen her leaving the office after hours. We also have records showing money missing during her shift." The boy quickly raised his hand like he was in school. "Your Honor, can I ask him something?" The room chuckled at the innocence of the request, but the judge nodded. "Go ahead." The boy turned toward the prosecutor, his voice small but sharp. "Did your witness take a picture? Or a video? Or anything real? 'Cause I wrote in my journal that my mom was with me, and I'm telling the truth. Can your witness say the same?" The prosecutor's jaw tightened. He hadn't expected to be cross-examined by a 10-year-old. He opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. The boy didn't stop. "And about the money, you said it went missing during her shift, right? But I looked at my mom's schedule. That day, she switched shifts with another lady because I had a school play. She wanted to be there. I even wrote it down. Want to see?" Gasps filled the courtroom as the boy held up another crumpled page from his notebook. The judge signaled for the bailiff to bring it forward. Sure enough, the entry mentioned his school play and how proud his mom was to be there. The judge's eyes narrowed. "Counselor, is it true that she switched shifts?" The prosecutor stammered, flipping through his papers. I'd have to double-check those records." The boy stepped closer, his voice steady. "You should have checked before you tried to say my mom was guilty. She's not. She's innocent. And I won't let you take her away from me just because we don't have money for a fancy lawyer." The judge leaned back, exhaling slowly. In the back of the room, people nodded, murmuring in agreement. The little boy had done what no one thought possible. He had poked holes in the case with nothing but his memory, his journal, and his love for his mother. For the first time, the prosecutor looked rattled, and the mother, though trembling, lifted her head high with pride. The judge's gavel struck once, echoing through the courtroom. "Order," he commanded, though his voice carried more reflection than anger. He studied the trembling prosecutor, then shifted his gaze back to the boy who now stood like a tiny warrior before the law. "Son," the judge said carefully, "you've raised important questions, but in this courtroom, truth must be tested. Are you prepared for that?" The boy swallowed hard, glancing at his mother, then back at the bench. "Yes, Your Honor. I'm not afraid." The judge motioned to the bailiff. "Bring in the witness." The doors creaked open, and a middle-aged man in a business suit stepped forward. His eyes darted nervously around the room as he took the stand. He was the co-worker who had claimed to see the boy's mother leaving the office late at night. The prosecutor straightened, suddenly regaining his confidence. "Mr. Daniels," the prosecutor began, "tell the court what you saw." The man cleared his throat. "I saw her leave the office building around midnight. She was carrying a bag. The next morning, we discovered the missing money." The prosecutor smirked, certain his case was restored. But then the little boy raised his hand again. "Your Honor, can I ask him something too?" The judge hesitated, then nodded. "Proceed." The boy walked slowly toward the witness, his small shoes echoing on the polished floor. He looked up, his eyes steady. "Mr. Daniels, how could you see her if you were supposed to be home? Don't you leave by 10? The man shifted uncomfortably. I was working late." The boy tilted his head. "Every night my mom came home after work. She was tired but always told me, 'Be honest, son, even if it's hard.' So I'm asking you, are you being honest right now?" The courtroom held its breath. The man fidgeted, tugging at his tie. The judge leaned forward. Answer the boy. Daniel stammered, sweat forming at his brow. Maybe I was mistaken. Maybe it wasn't her I saw. Gasps erupted. The prosecutor slammed his fist on the table. Objection! This is outrageous. But the judge silenced him with a glare. Overruled. The witness has just admitted doubt in his testimony. The boy turned back to the judge, his voice trembling but strong. See? He's not sure. But I am. I was with my mom. That's the truth. The mother broke into quiet sobs, covering her mouth with both hands. The one solid case against her was crumbling, piece by piece, at the hands of her own son. The courtroom was no longer the same place it had been an hour ago. At first, people had laughed when the boy stood up and called himself his mother's lawyer. Now, they leaned forward in silence, their eyes wide, as though witnessing history unfold. The judge adjusted his glasses, clearly shaken by what had just happened. Mr. Daniels, the judge said sternly, do you understand that giving false or uncertain testimony in this courtroom carries serious consequences? Daniels' face paled. Why, yes, Your Honor. I may have been pressured. I thought it was her, but now I can't be sure. The boy's small voice cut through the man's nervous stammer. You lied because my mom doesn't have money or power, didn't you? The man froze. He looked away, unable to meet the boy's piercing stare. The silence answered more than words ever could. The mother's shoulders shook with emotion. She whispered softly, Baby, please, that's enough. But the boy shook his head. His eyes never left the bench. No, Mama, they need to know the truth. The judge exhaled, rubbing his temples. This court has heard enough conflicting testimony to cast doubt on the prosecution's case. But before I make any decision, does the defense? He stopped himself, catching the irony. Does this young man have anything further to add? The boy stepped closer, placing his worn-out notebook on the judge's bench. Just one thing, Your Honor. People think being poor means you don't matter. They think if you don't have money for lawyers, you can't fight back. But my mom matters. She's worked her whole life to raise me right, even when she was tired. Even when she was hungry. If this court takes her away, it's not just her life that's broken, it's mine too. And I don't think that's what justice is supposed to mean. A hush fell over the room. Grown men cleared their throats. Women dabbed at their eyes with tissues. Even the bailiff shifted uncomfortably, as if holding back his own emotions. The prosecutor stood abruptly, his face flushed with frustration. Your Honor, this is emotional manipulation. This boy is not a lawyer, and this circus should never have been allowed. But the judge's gavel cracked sharply. Sit down, counselor. You've had your chance. And frankly, this child has done more to defend his mother than you've done to prove her guilt. The boy blinked, his lip trembling, as the weight of those words sank in. For the first time, he felt that maybe, just maybe, the system could hear him. The courtroom waited in absolute silence as the judge leaned back in his chair, his eyes lingering on the little boy. He tapped the gavel softly, once, twice, as though measuring his words. Then he spoke slowly, his voice carrying both authority and compassion. This court was called to decide whether this woman is guilty of theft. But what we've seen today is more than evidence. It's a reminder of what justice truly means. When the law becomes so rigid that it forgets the human heart, it fails its purpose. He looked directly at the prosecutor. Your case rests on weak testimony and unverified assumptions. Meanwhile, this boy, without training, without experience, brought forward records, testimony, and undeniable truth. He has done what your office should have done. Seek justice, not victory. The prosecutor's face turned crimson, but he remained silent. The judge turned toward the mother. She sat frozen, tears rolling down her cheeks, clutching her chest as though afraid this moment might disappear. Ma'am, the judge said gently, I find you not guilty of all charges. You are free to go. The gavel struck, final and firm. The room erupted. Some gasped, some applauded softly, while others simply wiped away tears. The little boy spun toward his mother, his eyes wide with relief. She dropped to her knees, wrapping him in her arms as if she'd never let go again. Sobs of joy shook her body. Baby, you saved me, she whispered. her voice breaking. "You saved us." The boy buried his face in her shoulder. "I told you, Mama. I wasn't going to let them take you. You're all I've got." The judge removed his glasses, dabbing his eyes before anyone could see. "Son," he called, his voice softer now. The boy turned, still clutching his mother's hand. "You may not realize it yet, but today you showed this entire court what courage looks like. Someday, if you choose, you'll make a fine lawyer." The boy's chin lifted proudly, his tears glistening. "Thank you, Your Honor. But today, I just wanted to be a son." The courtroom erupted in applause, gentle, respectful, but full of admiration. Even strangers stood, touched by the sight of a child's love breaking through the cold walls of justice. As they walked out of the courthouse hand in hand, the mother whispered through her tears, "You've given me more than freedom. You've given me hope." And the little boy, still holding his notebook like a badge of honor, smiled through his exhaustion. "We don't need money to be strong, Mama. We just need the truth." That day, everyone who witnessed the trial knew they had seen something extraordinary, a child's love so fierce. It rewrote the ending of a story that was supposed to be hopeless.